Hello and welcome everyone, this is Calebovitsch coming to you with another episode of Deck Check. On today's episode I will be revisiting the Horse Travelers, or rather the Strangers, and looking at the ton of cards they have gotten in the newest expansion, Echoes of Eternity, and trying to figure out what lies at the heart of the Strangers. Stay tuned. With the introduction of Echoes of Eternity, we have received a ton of new strangers into Eternal, something we had not gotten for the last 2 years or so. And now there is a ton of ways, old ways and ways anew to build a stranger deck in both Throne and Expedition, and I will get to one of the builds in a moment. I mean, you can probably see it on the right side of the screen, but I just wanted to say a couple of words about the strangers themselves. So we have gotten 21 new strangers. They come in 3 cycles, and there is an interloper as well. So there is a cycle of 5 common, 10 rare, and 5 legendary strangers. The common strangers proc or use their ability once when at least one stranger attacks on one side of the board or another. The rare strangers have 2 effects. One, when a player plays a stranger, and the other, you have to pay some amount of power and you have to exhaust your stranger. So it is half to all strangers, half to your stranger. And the legendary strangers have a huge effect when a stranger comes into play, and they have a great effect when this particular stranger attacks. So yes, there is, when you count in the new 21 strangers that we have gotten in the latest set, the fact that Varret, Hero in Training, is also a stranger that is neutral, that you can use in any and all decks, and that we have gotten a site strictly for strangers that is a factionless one, which means you can use it in any and all color combinations. That makes you want to build not a stranger deck, but a ton of stranger decks, because, well, their abilities depend on the colors they are at. For example, the Feln one mills. The Xenon one buffs all your units in the void. The Huru one it draws you relics from your deck, etc., etc. So there are a lot of build-arounds here and there. Even you can be using strangers in non-stranger decks, such as the Strange Burglar in Carver decks, or Shrine to Carve It decks, excuse me, because this one says sacrifice another unit. But what I wanted to do with this deck list is focus on trying to stay as low on colors as possible for a good effect, and if it's possible to make a 2-color stranger deck, for example. Because before Echoes of Eternity, what I was usually doing when I wanted to build a stranger deck, well, back in the beginning everyone wants to build a 5-color deck, but that's, in my opinion, not the way to go around it. Well, back then it was just to build 3 or 4-color stranger decks, them being rather aggro, because that's what they did. They buffed their own stats, they gained flying or charge, and they just attacked on the board. Right now, there are a ton of ways to gain card advantage off of your strangers. Also, there are a lot of strangers in all colors, and there are a lot of 2-cost strangers, which was the huge gap before Echoes of Eternity, because if you don't look only through Echoes of Eternity and you look at 2-cost strangers, before these and this one, you only had Hairtrigger Stranger, Grim Stranger, and the Influence ones, well, and Varret. But if you wanted to have a 2-drop stranger, you had to play Shadow at least, with either Fire or Primal. Right now, you don't need to. So what I wanted to do is focus on the legendary strangers, because they have the most powerful effects. And what I wanted to do is focus on 2 of my favorite, Grotov Stranger and Makar Stranger. These are the 2. So I tried to make just a 2-color deck, a Xenon deck based around these 2 strangers, and this is what I came up with. I'm calling it Heart of the Strangers, and I'm going to get to the name in a moment. This deck is utilizing 28 units, 27 power, 4 copies of Traverse Farm, and 16 spells that usually destroy other units, and the obvious market as well. So for the units, let's start with the Strangers package. You have your Magnificent Stranger, one of the cooler common ones that has been introduced in Echoes of Eternity. It is a 2-cost time Stranger, and as a time unit it has to have a good stat line, and it is a 2-cost 2/3, which is already Bold Adventure level, which is already better than all the 2/2s out there. When one or more strangers attack, reduce the cost of the top card of their owner's deck by 2. And if you're playing Magnificent Stranger on turn 2, if you're attacking on turn 3, then on turn 4 you can play something that costs a lot, like Makar Stranger or Grot of Stranger even. So this is a really nice ramp effect, especially that this deck sometimes tends to draw more cards than not, which means you can just play more cards on your turn or have some of your fast spells be active for 1 power, which is a huge deal, honestly. It is a huge deal if you can just play more stuff on the board on a turn than the opponent, if you have a steady stream of incoming cards. Also noteworthy for this ability, if the top card of your deck is a power, this effect goes to the first non-power card of your deck, and it stacks, which means if you use this ability several times, the top card of your deck, the top non-power card of your deck, gets its cost reduced by 2, then 2, then 2, so it usually becomes cheap, like cost 0, etc. So yes, Magnificent Stranger, a really magnificent 2-drop in time. Next up we have Strange Navigator, a 2-cost Xenon 3/2 Explorer Stranger. So yes, the rare strangers have 2 unit types actually. The comes into play effect is when a player plays a stranger, each unit in their void gets +1/+1, obviously triggers off of playing this Strange Navigator, but also has a very expensive ability of pay 9 and exhaust this to draw 5 units from your void. Now, one would think that paying 9 is very expensive and very hard to do. Not so if you're running 4 Grot of Strangers in a stranger-based deck, and you're probably going to see that later in the games. So yes, this ability is your end game, honestly. Given the fact that you can make some of your strangers or just units that are later put in your void cheaper with Magnificent Stranger, which means after you use Strange Navigator's ability, you can already get them into play. There is also the fact that you can grab one off of Traverse Farm, and this one doesn't need to target strangers. It can also target your smugglers, and it's not an ultimate ability. You can pay 9, exhaust this, then play your units, the opponent destroys them all, and then you get to pay 9 once again and bring them back. Obviously you want to bring another Strange Navigator back so as to have this option available for you once again. Also remember, if you're playing these, the units in your void get bigger, so you're bringing back just huge Frankenstein stranger monsters. That's about it. Next up we have the obvious 4 copies of Varad Hero in Training, the 2-cost 2/3 legendary stranger. Used to be a warrior. With Mastery 6, transform into Varad the Mighty, Varad the Stealthy, or Varad the Wise, usually Varad the Wise still. Next up, 4 copies of Determined Stranger, the 3-cost time stranger that is a 2/2 that boosts all your strangers by 1. Even Dune Smuggler for the obvious merchant package. I mean, right now there are the 1-cost spell cycle that also allows you to get to your black market, but in Throne I still rather use smugglers in unit-based decks, not in very low to the ground aggressive decks that don't want to be using smugglers. There was the case of whether we want to play one of the merchants or the smuggler, but this one having ambush is actually quite good. Being able to play it at the end of an opponent's turn is really usually good, especially when you can grab Nahid's Distillation, play a power, use Nahid's Distillation, refill your hand. So that is a great effect. Last but certainly not least, we have the legendary strangers, Makars and Grotovs. So Makar Stranger, his stat line seems rather low. For a 5 cost, it's a 5/3. With when a player plays a stranger, they draw the top card of the other player's deck. So essentially, this one is 5 cost, 5/3, draw a card. It is from the opponent's deck, not your deck, so you cannot synergize with your other strangers by grabbing more and playing more, especially if they're cheaper with Traverse Farm. But you usually have some of the opponent's tools to use against them. If you have multiple Makar strangers, each one triggers off of each stranger you're playing. So you have 3 of them in play and you play a stranger, you grab 3 cards. So this is one piece of your card advantage engine. But also you got to remember about the second ability, which is a huge deal in this deck. When Makar stranger attacks, kill a non-stranger enemy unit. Just like that. Next up, we have Grot of Stranger, and people have been comparing this card to Heart of the Vault a lot, even saying that this one is better. It is a 6-cost double time Stranger, a 7/7, so a huge stat line, but that's what you expect of a time legendary unit. When a player plays a Stranger, they play a random sigil from their deck. This one seems rather innocent, but this one has a lot of implications that I'm going to get to in a moment. But also, when Grot of Stranger attacks, shuffle a void of your choice into its owner's deck, then you draw 2 cards. So you have a choice, you have to shuffle a void into their owner's deck. Can be the opponent's, can be yours, but you are always the one drawing 2 cards. Also remember, Magnificent Stranger triggers usually before that, so the first non-power that you're drawing costs less. So you can usually just play it out on the turn. The first ability, one would seem it's rather innocent, but it is an effect, a direct effect for when Grot of Stranger comes into play. So it's so even when they just annihilate it for 2, you're always getting at least something from the deal of playing Grot of Stranger, and that is getting a sigil. And if you're playing Grot of Stranger, and later if you're playing other strangers, then you're just getting power into power into power into play. What are you doing with all that power? Well, you're using your Strange Navigator, getting 5 units back from your void to your hand, replaying them all. You just gotta remember with Grot of Stranger how many sigils you're playing in your deck. This one is running 11, could be running more, obviously. But for example, this one is running 2 more power cards, 2 more sigils, instead of 2 seek powers. Because you want those sigils in your deck, you want Grot of Stranger to just grab them for you. Another implication of Grot of Stranger, one that has eluded me a bit until I played Popotito's Firetime Primal deck in the ECQ on the weekend of recording this video. And that is, when a player plays a Stranger, the random sigil comes into play ready, not depleted, which means if you are at 6 max power, because you just played your 6 power source, you're playing Grot of Stranger, you're getting the sigil ready, so you still have 1 power. And what you can do with that is you can just use 1-cost cards. And you're running 1-cost cards in this deck, one of them being Predator's Instinct. This is a slow spell that costs 1. It is in time, so if you're playing Grot of Stranger, you always have the influence requirements for Predator's Instinct, unless you only have Shadow and stole an opposing Grot of Stranger off of your Makars, but that's usually not happening. Anyway, so the deal here is you're playing Grot of Stranger, you're getting a sigil, you're using that 1 power, you're playing Predator's Instinct on your Grot of Stranger that you have just played. Then you're using the killer attack, killing an opposing unit, but remember that the second part of Grot of Stranger ability triggers, because killer attack is an attack. So you're playing Grot of Stranger, you're giving it killer, you're attacking an enemy unit, killing it usually, but you're also shuffling a void into their owner's deck, and you're drawing 2 cards. What better deal can there be? And if you don't have Predator's Instinct, you also have 4 copies of Suffocate. So this is your tempo dealing with the board, because if the opponent has multiple units out there and you just want to get back in the game, you use your 6 power to play Grot of Stranger. So you have 1 blocker, and you're using your power that you're just getting to suffocate another opposing unit. So technically that deals with 2 units already, so that makes your board state slightly better. And these are the, right now for me, there are the obvious inclusion to playing Grot of Stranger. I mean, you could also think of just playing Xenon Initiation, because it gives +1/+1, but you can't play it on the turn you're playing Grot of Stranger when you're topping off at 6. So this is why Predator's Instinct is here, not the other one. Also, you obviously could be running, and not Stranger, but Hunt, Twilight Hunt. This is almost the same thing. It does trigger Nightfall. You're not running dinosaurs unless someone equivocates one of your units into a dinosaur, but that's a really fringe scenario. But the Nightfall clause, you don't want to be giving your opponent any cards with you not running things like Teacher of Humility, so not making them suffer for having additional cards, so to say. So yes, Grot of Stranger. But also, it's still not the end, guys. It's still not the end, because when Grot of Stranger attacks, you get to shuffle a Void into their owner's deck. And this can be used in one of two ways. Target your opponent or target yourself, and it rarely is a downside. Usually it's an upside, because this takes care of all Void-based strategies and synergies for the opponent, especially when you can proc it on the turn you're playing Grot of Stranger. So a Reanimator opponent usually is not expecting, okay, so Grot of Stranger, Predator's Instinct, kill their Sporefolk or what have you, and reshuffle their Void back in, which means they cannot get anything back with Grasping into Shadow, with Vara, etc., etc. But also just the opponent not having any cards in Void is usually good, because a lot of colors have stuff that interacts with the Void. Another thing that is noteworthy, if the opponent is running a ton of card creation in their deck, for example, Assembly Line creates 3 Grenadins, or they're getting Totemite Pups, or they're getting a lot of other things, and those things are getting back to their Void, or Snowballs, or what have you, or Treasure Troves even, but that's just slowing them down. Grot of Stranger makes the opponent reshuffle all those bad cards back into their deck. But you also have to be wary of what you have in your Void. For example, if the opponent attacks you with Amaran Stinger and they put a lot of Scorpion Traps into your deck, and you already drew a couple, do you want to reshuffle them back into your deck? Usually not. So yeah, there is that. It doesn't make this card balanced. This card is still very, very strong, and given that a lot of people have compared it to Heart of the Vault, the card, just for reference if you don't know what that is. Heart of the Vault, a 7-cost huge warp Praxis unit that deals damage, draws a card, etc., etc. So that is why I'm calling this deck Heart of the Strangers, because this card is currently the Heart of the Strangers, unless it gets nerfed in the next couple of days. Okay, back to the deck. The obvious inclusion of 4 copies of Traverse Farm. Strangers cost 1 less. This is one of the better static abilities on a site when it comes to building a deck around it, but also have the Triumphant Stranger's agenda of playing Stranger's Mark, which usually doesn't do a lot of things unless it takes an Aegis off of an opposing unit. Reunite draws a Stranger of your choice from your deck to your hand, and it is not always Grot-offs. It could be Makars for some card advantage. It could be the Navigator if you have a ton of power and you want to get everything back. It has a lot of versatility here. And Unity Within, give one of your units and each of your units that share a type with it +1/+1. Hint, hint, it's Stranger. And Triumphant Stranger obviously usually wins the game when it sticks in play for a couple of turns. Last but not least, we have 8 other kill spells here. Desecrate, a 3-cost double shadow fast spell, kill a unit, you take 3 damage. And Banish, 3-cost Xenon fast spell, kill an enemy unit or relic with cost 5 or less. Now, being able to play Banish means I do not have to play Sabertooth Pride Leader's main deck, but I still have access to Sabertooth Pride Leader in my market. Rounding out, we have 27 power, 12 copies of dual powers. I'm not running banners because I do need a lot of space for the sigils, and I want to be running sigils because I am running Grot of Stranger. But I also need to have 4 copies of Emblem of Grot in this deck. This is the gain time and influence, take 1 damage, but on Decimate you get to create a 2/2 Exalted Elemental, Earth Elemental. And playing these is great if you're playing Killer. Remember all those Exalted Killer chains that everyone is already sick of? Well, there you go. You get to create a 2/2, you get to give it Killer, then you get to pass the 2/2 Killer weapon onto something else, and, well, chaos ensues usually. So there is that. There's the power base. As for the market, You have your Annihilate, kill a unit with a single faction. You have your Sabertooth Pride Leader, a 4-cost 3/5 ambusher that on summon either kills an enemy relic or you gain 3 health, usually kills an enemy relic, like, what's that one called? Xenon Obelisk, usually, lately. You have your Xenon Temple, a good follow-up that allows you to, for example, play Xenon Initiation, which is killer on one of your legendary strangers, proc that, and just get rid of the opposing board. Nahid's Distillation, if you're playing a 3-costing Smuggler, then on turn 4 you get to draw 3 cards. In one of my previous versions of this deck, I was running Nahid's Distillation's main and not running Predator's Instinct at all, but I believe Predator's Instinct is just better because you can combo with these legendary strangers. In Nahid's Distillation, if you're running Grotovs and Makars and you're proccing them reliably with Predator's Instinct, you usually have enough cards. I mean, you have your Traverse Farm for card advantage, because if you want card advantage, just Traverse Farm grabs you Makar Stranger or Grotov Stranger, and you can still try and protect the farm, save the farm, and then get Triumphant Stranger, which is another huge piece of card advantage. The last piece of the market right now is one that is usually my flex slot. Right now it is Stray into Shadow, the 5-cost double shadow spell that says each unit permanently gets -4 health. Yeah, I've been running into a ton of go wide decks lately. I mean, even-handed even-handed Elysian is usually going wide on the board, and Stray into Shadow can put an end to it, especially that you can just ambush Eben Dune Smuggler on turn 4 and play this on turn 5 onto a not expecting opponent. You can also run stuff like Zindel in the market. Obviously, the big Zindel revealed when the 8-cost huge Radiant that gives you 2 Halichi, etc., etc. So yes, this is my take on a Stranger deck. There is a ton of Stranger decks out there, both in Throne and in Expedition, but right now for me this is the heart of the Strangers, at least in Throne, based on Grotov Stranger and Makar Stranger, and a lot of supporting Stranger casts in the common and rare, uncommon, rare, and legendary variety. So yeah, that is that. Let's get on to the games now, before heading back here and talking about some of the cards that had not made it into the deck or the market. This is a very good starting hand. We have removal. We can start on turn 2 with Varad. We do have Sight that can grab us anything that is a Stranger. So yes, this is a rather good hand, I would say. Just waiting what the opponent does. Crest of Wisdom, sure. Putting something on the bottom, that's usually a good sign. I mean, for you it's better if the opponent is putting something on the bottom, not on the top. Unless you have Makar Stranger, then you want their good cards. Elysian Insignia into Teacher of Humility. Yes, this looks like good old even Elysian. And it is much better to just get rid of it now. You are running a ton of card draw theoretically in your deck. You don't want those disciplinary weights weighing on you. Even-handed Golem, if you were not suspecting it's an even deck, well, now you know. If the opponent doesn't have any Sigils in hand, they don't have any more Sand Warriors in hand, probably. Now, the question is whether we are playing Varad or Strange Navigator, and I believe Varad is a slightly better choice now, because if we played the 3-2, we just trade off with the 3-3, so that one really doesn't matter. But right now, we're stopping at least 2 damage incoming, and being at 25, we usually don't care about just taking 3 right now. This deck does not have a lot of health, a lot of getting back health, a lot of ways to get back health, just the kitty in the market, unless you are able to get something from your opponent with Makar Stranger. Yeah. So right now there are several options. One is playing Desecrate, other is playing Traverse Farm, or just the stranger. But as far as I remember, I opted to just wait and desecrate on the opponent's turn, because on turn 5 I can play Traverse Farm and play Strange Navigator, because then it costs 1. The Navigator, not the farm. The downside of running farm in this deck, which is not a huge downside, is that, well, it puts some not really amazing spells into your void, and then you're just feeling bad when you're reshuffling your void back into your deck with Grot of Stranger. Right now, I believe the opponent made a small mistake of putting all eggs in one basket, of putting Sodi's Spell Shaper on their Teacher of Humility. If they put it on another unit, I would still have to just get rid of the teacher, and they would still draw a card. Also noteworthy in this variant of the deck, I was not running Stray into Shadow in the market. I put it, I think, after this game, because if I did have that, my plan of action would be playing Smuggler into playing Stray into Shadow on their full board. Alright, Grot of Stranger. Let's grab a power. Predator's Instinct. Let's kill something, like their potential card draw. Let's, still reshuffle ours or reshuffle theirs. They have some good cards. They have Teachers, they have Spell Shaper, they have Equivocate. But somehow I opted to shuffle theirs back anyway. Killing that or trying to kill that. No, it's getting ambushed by Gentle Grazer. Into Temple Scribe, into them drawing a card. But still, the Sloth dies. And we play a power, so either they take care of the farm right now, or we get hit for 4. And I believe farm is their target, yes? Or should be their target. Into Sandstorm Titan, so they're drawing 2 cards. But it's actually a rather okay deal, because their 1/1 flyer no longer flies. Sand Warrior, sure. So they have a ton of cards here. Playing Makar Stranger to grab a card from them, get a non-depleted power source, so we are able to play Determined Stranger. But I drew in an Equivocate, and that makes me want to just hold back for a moment and equivocate something back to the opponent's hand. I mean, they might also be attacking, like playing Sodi Spell Shaper into attacking. So there is also that. Teacher of Humility, sure. Another friendly wisp. And I opted to play the Ambusher and get Xenon Temple. And you're gonna see why. Ooh, another Makar Stranger is very nice, but I opted to go for the Temple. Play Xenon Initiation on Makar Stranger. Killer one of their units. The flyer that can draw them some cards. Prog the kill a non-stranger when this attacks to kill the SST. And still have 3 power up to equivocate something. For example, if they make an Alpha Assault on the on Xenon Temple. Then I can block the 2/2, block a 3/3, equivocate another 3/3, Temple takes 2, and we still have Xenon Augury to draw a card and gain 3 health. Okay, that is an additional option of getting health in this deck. Also, when you have the option of equivocating a 0-cost unit and a 2-cost unit, it's better to give them helpful Doorbot, isn't it? And that should be it. And it is it. On to game number 2. This hand is rather decent. We're going second. We have Varrot with the backup of 2 Determined Strangers. So that is a keeper. Also remember this deck is running 27 power, not 25 power, which means the chance of us drawing one is slightly higher, like here. Also we had Emblem of Grotov and Predator's Instinct for the small killer combo. Strategize. Okay. Put something to the bottom, thank you. Strange Navigator. Sure, but it's still Varrot. Wisdom of the Elders main. Now, we didn't draw another power, so I cannot decimate here, but I can go for Determined Stranger and make the Mastery faster by a turn. Another Strategize, the opponent keeps digging, and we're on the faster part of this mid-range value town of Strangers. Varos favor our face, sure. And that means we could go for farm, or we could go for another Determined Stranger, but I think going for another Determined Stranger just puts so much pressure onto the opponent. It would be an attack for 8. But I opted to go for Traverse Farm and to reunite ourselves and grab Grotov Stranger, probably. If I manage to draw a power, and just attack for 6 now. Turn Varrot into Varrot the Wise. Against Fallen colors, I believe they usually are running a lot of removal. Hailstorm kills Determined Stranger, gets Aegis off of Varrot the Wise. A Strange Navigator appears. Sure, let's see. Do we go for the greedy play of playing Stranger's Mark now, or Unity Within and make Varrot bigger? I believe both options are okay. I think Unity Within is slightly better, because then if the opponent plays an Aegis unit, I can get that off. Also, sure, let's make a huge board. I mean, this is banking on the opponent not having another Hailstorm, and this is a Hail Mary Storm, kind of, sort of. But even if they manage to kill most of the board right now with another Hailstorm, they probably don't have anything for Varrot the Wise, and hopefully I can draw a power to get a Grotov Stranger, and then farm probably stays alive. And yeah, the opponent didn't have another Hailstorm, which means this was a rather short game, showing you how aggressive this mid-range Stranger list can be against an opponent who just wants to draw a ton of cards instead of killing our units. Anyway, on to game number 3 now. 3-2 costing Strangers, Predator's Instinct, that's a keeper. We do need some power to be able to play that Makar Stranger, though. Archers! Which means, yes, I am keeping this. And first playing Varrot, then playing Varrot, probably. The opponent plays Emblem into Teacher of Humility, which means I have to get rid of Teacher of Humility somehow. And even if it's 2 for 1, even if it's Strange Navigator with Predator's Instinct, we still have to get rid of that one. I don't want to go for Varrot number 2 because that's really too fragile. That'll probably just equivocate it. Because what I'm guessing at this point is that they're playing Even Elysian. That deck is so numerous right now on the ladder, and was so numerous at the ECQ. But it turns out I was wrong. The opponent is running Praxis. And Teacher of Humility number 2, and torching my own unit. Fortunately, I drew a second unit, which makes me able to just double block their Teacher of Humility. I don't want those disciplinary weights on me. They're a curse. They're a burden. They're both. So this is a double block, even if they have a Seer or Kairos Choice or something like that. I still need to try and evade this. Fortunately, they didn't have anything here. They're just playing a Crest of Impulse. And a Kato Arena Herald. Grabbing them a Totemite. Sure. I believe I want to attack through this. Make the top card of my deck cost less. I mean, I'm still at 25. My health total doesn't matter that much, even if they take 2 back at us. The positive effect of decreasing the top costing non-power card from our deck by 2 is a huge effect. A Maran Stinger. I don't want to see any Scorpions in here. I'm just blocking. Eben Dune Smuggler costing 1. The fact that this one is fast means I can ambush a kitty later on. If, for example, I had another power and another time influence, because remember, I'm only at 1 time right now. But also I have the cool option of going for Annihilate that I will have to think about in a moment. Because the opponent is playing Sickles, the Burning Sand. And I was thinking about it, and it turns out I want to get rid of that Makar Stranger for a moment because, well, I'm still missing that power, and the option of killing that, not taking 5, killing their 2-1, it was just a good deal for me in my opinion. I mean, I'm not in a great position by any means, and the opponent is filling their void, but fortunately I drew a Makar Stranger that right now is costing only 3 because of my Magnificent Stranger, and I was so lucky to get Teacher of Humility from the opponent, and I am grabbing, I'm decreasing the cost of the top non-power card from my deck by 2. So yes, the top decking of Makar Stranger there was just great. Unfortunately, it's getting torched. And the Xenon Obelisk from the opponent and their Totemite suddenly attack. But hello, another Makar Stranger, the 3rd one now. Grabbing an East Annex Smuggler, and that is a fun fact. East Annex Smuggler, we have a black market, so it can actually grab Sabertooth Pride Leader, Xenon Temple, or Nahid's Distillation from our market. It's probably going to be Kitty to get rid of the Obelisk. But it's not the end of the game yet. Now they're playing an East Annex Smuggler. I would be guessing for some sort of removal. No? Or not yet? Sure. But you gotta remember, if I'm attacking with my Stranger, I'm just killing a unit like they're 3-4. Suffocate, costing 0 at that. Yes, let's attack with both. We are the aggro now. Kill that. Decrease the cost. I think I should have played Smuggler to get the Teacher out. Grenadin Drone and Flame Blast, so that's what they have gotten. Flame Blasting our Makar Stranger. Now I opted to go for Pride Leader, even though I don't have a second time. And I believe it is a mistake not suffocating and not attacking here, not ace-pacing here. Should have suffocated one of their 2-2s and ace-paced. Even if I traded my 3-3 for their 2-2, they were still rather lower there. And what they're getting is a 3-3 Exalted here. Crest of Mystery. Determined Stranger, yeah, it can stay. A Sabertooth Pride Leader. apt to ambush their 3/3 Exalted when it's attacking. But actually what the opponent drew is another Xenon Obelisk. Oops, that's a spoiler. Attacking with just the Exalted one. And I thought for a moment, but I still thought that I want to block their unit. I did not need to block their unit. I could have just taken it, suffocated one of their 2/2s and ace-paced. Especially that I have Determined Stranger and Suffocate here. And I remember this was a mistake, because let me pause there for a moment. If I suffocated their 2/2, ace-paced, they would take at least 5 damage here. And if I didn't block their Exalted Elemental, my board would be still very safe. So this was a couple of mistakes I made. I wasn't paying enough attention to this game, unfortunately. But right now, I do know that. I mean, I got that after I clicked. So another lesson here, think before you click. For example, when I was playing one of the previous ECQs, and I also did that in the last one, I'm just setting my hand near the mouse, not on the mouse, near the mouse when I'm playing on my PC. So as to first think, then when I have everything lined out for the turn, then I'm putting my hand on the mouse, then I'm clicking. So think before you click. That sounds like a cliche, but that's how it works. And right now the opponent would already be dead, probably, because they would lose several blockers, or all of their blockers. They would be at 1. Rambo. Grot of Stranger, sure. But I don't believe I'm in a point of attacking with everyone yet. Probably next turn. I don't need to suffocate anything yet. I can do it next turn because it costs 0. Towards the 3/3 Stranger, obviously. Traverse Farm. Traverse Farm could get us something. No, I don't want to end the turn. At the very least, I want to go to Traverse Farm and grab another Stranger, probably Strange Navigator. But this was another small mistake that I have made, because I was thinking, okay, let's get Strange Navigator buff units in our Void, because we are getting a power off of that one. So we can use the ultimate of Strange Navigator in a moment. But then when I'm attacking with Grot of Stranger, am I shuffling the opponent's Void back, or am I shuffling my own Void back? And I can't shuffle my own Void back right now, so I have to shuffle the opponent's, but they do have some good cards there. So yeah, that was a small also mistake on my part here. Fortunately, those 2 mistakes, I have gotten away with it, despite playing rather suboptimally there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the game, so let's get back to the studio and talk about a couple more cards. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Heart of the Strangers. And the Heart of the Strangers lies within Xenon Temple, that is hidden as Traverse Farm. And that should be in the lore. Oh, lore. Anyway. There are several things you can change in this deck. For example, you can include Nahid's Distillations back main for some of the Predator's Instinct if you're not enjoying that interaction, or maybe some of the Desecrates. You can turn Banishes into kitties, or you can just include more kitties. You can skip on the Traverse Farm and play Xenon Temple's main deck instead of them to have even more killer there. But I believe the main deck is good as it is right now. For the longest of times, I also thought that I am lacking interaction with the opponent's Void in this deck. And then I remember, yeah, okay, so that is the line of Grot of Stranger that I remember about the least. I usually remember about getting sigils, I usually remember about drawing cards, but I usually forget about reshuffling Voids. when it comes to strategy. So I was thinking about cards such as Waylay or Nullblade, but actually I have Grot of Stranger, and theoretically I also have Xenon Temple. For relic removal you have Banish's Main, but you also have Pride Leader in the market. For unit removal you have a ton of cards main deck, but you also have Annihilate and Strain to Shadow and kind of Xenon Temple in the market. For card advantage you have Makar Stranger, Grot of Stranger, Traverse Farm and Nahid's Distillation in the market. So yeah, there is a ton of things you can do with this deck. It doesn't get you through board stalls all at once, but you can fight through them. You have very good late game plans with Strange Navigator. Even if you just attack with all your legendary strangers, even if you just trade them off, later you're just playing Strange Navigator, getting them back. And remember, if you put a killer on one of your units and you get it back with Strange Navigator, well now, then it just works. The biggest downside of this deck is that it doesn't have any life gain. So you might think about putting something like that here or maybe in the market. Maybe you could go for something like Shadow, that is time. Pale Rider's Timepiece, giving one of your units Flying, Deadly, Killer and Lifesteal. Maybe that is something you might want to put in the market for the memes or for the glory. And if you want to put some glory somewhere, for the glory of Balep ports or the surrounding areas. Anyway, this is going to be it for the deck check of the week. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, if you're enjoying the show and you're enjoying the deck check series and all my eternal highlights and other videos, remember, click on subscribe. I don't know where it is, but you're probably going to find it somewhere. Thank you for watching. Calebovitsch out. See you next week.